I made up my mind last night, said Phil. But I didn't tell you because I wanted to be sure. I could wait, of course, but if I wait, there's a chance I'll never go. I don't want to live out my life here wishing I had gone. You'll tell Pa, won't you? After I'm gone? Sometime this afternoon, giving me a chance to get away? He wouldn't follow you, said Edward Lambert. It would be best for you to tell him. He might reason with you, but he wouldn't stop you going. If I tell him I'll never go, said Phil. I see the look upon his face, and I'll never go. You'll have to do this much for me, Ed. You'll have to tell him, so I won't see the look upon his face. Are you a traveler or hermit, dear viewer? Can one be both? Tonight, on Roll of a Tangent, I, Nikita Zuev, and my colleagues, XJ and Robert Gibson, will dissect a story named Brother. The tale was written by Clifford D. Simak and first appeared in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction in October 1977. Also appearing in this issue was an essay by Isaac Asimov, The Subtlest Difference, which covered life and death and how those concepts relate. Returning to today's story, Brother is set on a future version of Earth as humanity has achieved spaceflight on a commercial level and centers on a strange man who has lived all his life in a secluded part of the world, abandoning the idea of seeing the stars. Or is that really the man we are following? For there are tales of this Edward having a brother who left to explore the skies of 1,000 worlds. Yet no record of this man exists, officially at least. After a fateful encounter with a psychologist from a local university, Lambert, the protagonist of our tale, has to face the truth of the matter and dive deep into his mind to find out where the truth lies. And when his long-traveled sibling appears on his doorstep, the story asks its readers if they genuinely believe that our main character has a brother. A very interesting tale. Very, how would I say it? It has a lot in it for it being so short. It has a lot of plots for it being so short. And it does its best to juggle them. And I guess tonight we'll discuss with the panel here how well does it do it in their opinion and mine. But before we continue on all that, I'm addressing you, the viewer. Go read it, because if you listen to this discussion without reading it, you will spoil yourself on the thing that makes this story interesting, the mystery. Now, if you don't care about that, and if you feel like that won't affect the way you see the story first, then keep listening. And I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion tonight. But regardless, Clifford D. Simak. Robert, what do you feel about that offer? What do, when you hear Simak, what goes up in your mind? Is it this tale or is it something else?
I would say that this tale belongs to a kind of large area of Simak's fiction, the best area, I should think, where it's rooted in the land in which he grew up, the southwest corner of Wisconsin, and he is unequaled in his ability to convey the sense of place in this rural setting. And not only that, but he links it in various stories to cosmic matters. For example, in his novel Time and Again, the uh, the Wisconsin setting is part of an administrative area governing the entire galaxy, which sounds rather absurd when I put it that way, but it works in the novel. Now, this particular story, uh, I would say, is true to the best of Simak. It's not without flaws. I don't know what you people think, but I find the what we'll no doubt get round to discussing, the business of the follower very bizarre intervention in the story, and I don't feel myself that it fits in very well. But it doesn't spoil the story. It just makes one raise one's eyebrows somewhat as one's reading it.
Before you go any further about this follower,
Yeah.
right? You, yes, you, the one who thought about it but didn't leave. This is your last chance. Because, I think we're getting closer and closer to the spoiler territory. But, let's start with XJ's thoughts. What did you feel about Brother? Do you and go all the way out? Like that. That last person, I just talked to them. It's the last chance they got.
Okay, well, one more time. This is your last chance to go on before you spoil yourself. We
We're
like
giving it a lot of chances
we,
tonight.
we like to give second, third, and fourth chances in this podcast. Nah, just kidding. There's this artist, and I'm ashamed to admit that I don't remember his name, but he likes painting very pastoral scenes with giant mechs in the background. It is such a strange feeling, when you are just like looking at these images of this artist, because they are very out of place. And when I say pastoral scenes, it's like literally a painting that you would see in those old European masters, in the style of those old European masters, where it's just peasants in clothing and farming, like tilling the ground and all that, and then you have these giant mechs in the background. So that's kind of the overall feeling when I was reading Clifford the Brother, because Robert is spot on. It's like a very odd feeling of being in rural America. And then you have this backdrop of spaceships and intergalactic travel, and it's a very strange feeling, a very mixed and strange feeling of very old and very new mixed together. So it's rather refreshing. I'm not sure if it works all that well, the blending, in my opinion. There is a little bit of feeling of the space travel being very out of place in that extremely rural setting. And quite aside from that, I was watching the audio levels when you were doing the summary, Nikki, so I missed what year it was published in.
1977.
1977. Okay, so it's fairly late. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, 1977 is still pretty early in the science fiction era, and so I find myself thinking, like, the plot itself, to me, as a person in 2023, having read through a whole bunch of science fiction stories already, the premise seems very old and contrived. But I'm trying not to judge it from a modern reader's perspective, and just trying to judge it from a 1977 perspective. And the idea of a person with awakened powers who could project, who could do like basically an astral projection of himself, who goes off, has his own will, and then gallivant across the galaxy in various different ways, and then somehow sharing that experience with the projector. Well, it feels very odd, but also at the same time absolutely bonkers overpowered. like it's very it's very it's a very cool way of experiencing space and all that without actually having to be there yourself, which honestly in my mind it is perhaps not such a great vehicle for storytelling, because part of the conflict and drama of a science fiction story is the person actually going out there to experience all the different worlds and then facing the dangers and stuff like that. With this astral projection, it's like he was never in danger. He never will be, because the projection is doesn't is it can't harm the projection. There's nothing. He's not susceptible to bodily harm, and so like there is no drama to be had. And within this short story itself, the only real drama is the protagonist always thought he had a brother. And it turned out that this brother is not real and is just his projection, like quite literally a projection. So that was the only drama within the story, like this acceptance of him not really being mad, but also kind of mad. And so like within the confines of a short story, I suppose that's fine, but you know, I don't feel like that particular vehicle will work very well for like actual longer form for the story, or at least I don't see how it can be done. You know, it also reminds me of a different short story that we did about this guy who could teleport, the very advanced Earth being very advanced monster. I remember that's the name of the short story that we did, right?
By Vogt, yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, yeah, you know, that's a neat way of gallivanting across the galaxy, I gotta admit. But yeah, and exactly as Robert had pointed out, I feel the introduction of the follower to be really out of place. It's like just like for no. In my mind, he could Clifford Simak could have just stuck with the professor of psychology that visited him to push that particular plot point forward more. It didn't really require the follower, which is supposed to be some kind of a alien. It just felt very out of place because he comes, says a few things, and off he goes. Like, what was even the point of adding the guy? Yeah. So I think I'm trying not to be too judgmental on the story, because published in 1977, this could quite possibly be a very fresh take on certain concepts, and it could feel very intriguing and mind-bending when first read way back then. But right now, I guess it doesn't strike me as being very particularly captivating in this period of time. That's my take. And yeah, back to either of you, Robert, Nikki.
Go ahead,
I'd
Robert.
pick on 2 points that XJ's made. Firstly, I agree that it wouldn't be a good vehicle for doing a series of stories or a longer story, but that's that's all right because a short story is a short story, and it often depends not so much on originality of concept as on the way a concept is treated. And apart from the follower business, I think it's done very nicely in this one. I particularly think that the drama, from the dramatic point of view, it's a question of the way Simak deals with the denial of this chap Lambert, his long denial of the evidence that he hadn't had a brother, his argument with Anderson from the university, and of course Lambert is wrong, but to the extent with which he is wrong is also another fascinating part of the story because XJ said that it's the projection is not a real other person in a way. Well, in a way, but it's to do with mysterious categories here. It's like in a vampire story. You think, well, in what sense is a vampire alive and in what sense is it dead? You can argue forever about it. Well, you can argue forever about to what extent Phil is a separate person and to what extent he's simply an emanation of Edward Lambert. The other point that XJ made was about the incongruity between the rural setting and the interstellar connection of that area of the world. And I'm not too sure that that is actually implausible. I can imagine, I don't suppose it ever will happen, but if humanity does achieve interstellar flight in a big way and in an economical way, it might drain economic pressure from the land so that the center of economic gravity moves out among the stars, and in fact you might get a kind of park-like or rural setting and accompanied by local Starfleet depots, whatever, and they would all go together naturally. In fact, the one would help to preserve the other. The Starflight would help to preserve the rural setting. Those are the points I'd like to make from what XJ was saying. And Nikki, how about you?
Oh yeah, I have quite a lot to say, and I semi-intentionally made sure that I heard out what you guys had to say, so I didn't repeat myself or take away from many of your points. Firstly, the story itself. I mean, 1977 is kind of the end of classic sci-fi. I mean, maybe even a bit after that. So I disagree with that point when it comes to what XJ said. I mean, look at Desertion that we read. Desertion, that's a mind-boggling story. That's a tale that will, shiver your entrails even today when you read it.
Yeah.
And it was written so long before this. So I'm not giving it any slack when it comes to that. In fact, I kind of think like this seems to be a little bit self-biographical because that's why I asked Robert.
Sorry to cut in, Nikki. Maybe you can tone down your mic a little bit. Sorry.
How would I do that?
Just your input levels for your mic. Sorry, man. Sorry to do this housekeeping stuff. Yeah, because your levels are a little bit hot.
How about now?
Yeah, better. Sorry
All
for
right.
the interruption, dear viewers.
All right, and in the sense, you have something Simak has written where it echoes to me the type of personality he had. He writes a lot about these type of people, individuals who observe the land they are upon. Brother is, as you yourself said, is kind of in line with a lot of his fiction. And I'm not really sure what he was trying to accomplish with this tale. It feels very aimless to me, and I think that's my biggest issue with it. I like the prose, I like the way it's written. I chose the best part of the tale, in my opinion, which is the dialogues. The dialogues are great until the follower comes, but we'll get to that. Um, and the description itself isn't bad, but again, the aimlessness of it all is what really disturbs me. Well, maybe not disturbs me, but irks me in some way. Uh, we have we have a psychiatrist who comes in. That's plot A, and he's gonna find out what's going on here. He's gonna interview this guy, and then he just, for the lack of a better word, pisses off. He just goes away. Plot A is gone. Now we're with this guy, and now we're within his mind. And now we're trying to understand whether or not he had a brother. So plot B has started. Without resolving plot B, we create plot C. Some some creature comes into the house and goes, right, I've been chasing you my entire life. Here's my backstory. Literally vomits the backstory onto us, and then plot C has a very soft resolution. All right. Well, I didn't get what I want. I had a talk with you. You have a nice day. And then he just leaves. And then we get back to plot B, which is this guy wrestling whether or not he has a brother. And then he just reconciles with himself that it doesn't matter whether he had a brother or not. He had a good life. And now he wants to spend the rest of that life in what he knows is a fantasy. Okay. What? What is this about? What is Simak trying to do here? Why does it feel so aimless? I have a couple of ideas as to how to make it better, but before I do so, let me talk just a little bit about what I did like. I really enjoyed Edward's character. It's seldom that we see a writer really delve deep into somebody who is not meant to be likable, you know? And he seems to be the type of a person who's very secluded, and if his neighbors lived close enough to him, I can imagine him using his binoculars and looking at their lawn and saying like, "Oh, that's cut too roughly. Like, I gotta tell them," and so on and so forth. He seems really like a stare, and then he's got this interesting pastime of writing, about landscapes and nature, and that's also fascinating to have that as a character trait. But beyond that, I mean, this is another they for me, unfortunately, where I had such high hopes the first couple of pages, and then it just disappointed me, unfortunately. Uh, Now, I'm not look. I'm not devaluing the story. I still think that there's some merit in it, and I know I've said a lot of negative things about it, but I don't want to create the impression that it's unreadable. The prose is great. Simak knows what he's doing. Um, the the plots in isolation seem fine, but together they're a jumbled mess. That's kind of the issue, right? Um, and it's just there is not enough setup. That's my biggest complaint, I guess. Because if there was enough setup for the follower, we would be intrigued by his arrival. There's like he's mentioned once by some neighbor being seen, but that's not enough. We have to have something else somewhere there at the beginning. Same with the reveal of this psychic ability, the next step in the evolution of man. Not enough setup. Um, the psychologist trying to find out what he's doing. Nice setup, but then he goes away and we never see him again, and it's very frustrating. So yeah, to me it kind of felt like three stories that got stitched up together because maybe Simak ran out of time. Kinda. There you go. Those are my very hurtful thoughts.
I think I'll have to risk
Oh.
disagreeing here, because the disagreeing particularly with the idea that the story has an aimlessness about it. I don't think so. The way it's constructed, and remember, this is a short story,
Hmm.
the way it's constructed is that the self discovery turns out to be the aim, although Lambert doesn't realize that it's going to be that way. He thinks he's going to spend the rest of his life just chugging along in his comfortable old way. But actually, he makes this terrific discovery with the aid of his alter ego, Phil, that he is the first step in a great leap forward in evolution. That I would have thought is enough to prevent a short story like this from any um, feeling of being aimless. And the huge implication of this forward step in evolution is enough, I would say, to mark out the story.
Now, when I say aimless, you have to understand, Robert, I'm not talking about what happens within the story. I'm talking about the editorial. And I specifically used editorial words like plot A, plot B, plot C. That's what I'm talking about. I understand what you mean. And story wise, I agree. Yes, it doesn't have this aimless quality. It has um, an attempt to create some sort of a revelation at the end. But what I'm saying is, through this strange editing and the appearances and collapses of plots and plots within the story, it creates a feeling of aimlessness to me.
Well, the psychologist Anderson has played his part. By the time he goes, he realizes he's blotted his copybook rather, and he goes, but he's probably sown the seed of doubt, if not in Lambert himself, then at least in the reader. And then we have the hugely dramatic, quiet, but nevertheless hugely dramatic knock on the door, and Phil, the brother, returns and holds out his hand to be shaken, and they can't shake hands because he's not substantial enough. And that is an eerie and unforgettable moment in the story. I would say that these moments, these themes, are quite nicely strung along. So I don't get the feeling that it's a ramshackle or disorganized or uncoordinated plot, except for the follower.
Ah, all right. I knew you'd have to give up your position somewhere. So even a rotten ship cannot be saved by titanium nails. That's the way I see it. These moments, the titanium nails in my analogy, they can't save the ship from sinking, because you can't just have the thing that holds it together be the only thing that's strong. If the rest of it collapses without them, then what's it called? You have to work on the wood. You've got to work on the rest of the ship. And here's my here's where I'll give ground. I'll completely agree with you that these moments that you talked about, especially one with the brother appearing, Phil. I thought when I was reading this for the first time, I said to myself, all right, it's picking back up again. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be cool. Let's see where this goes. And then the story disappointed me. You see? So just because there was this great moment doesn't save the story in my eyes. Unfortunately, it actually somehow it's even worse to have something that's so dramatic and interesting wasted on something that doesn't live up to the potential that it could have had. And let me, I always put my money where my mouth is, because I will tell you the way I changed the story, right? To make it better, because otherwise I'm just a blobberhead, here soiling Simak's reputation. Now, to preface this, I'm not saying this would be better than Simak's, but I think it will be, right? So first, I would start the story with Edward being confused because he's going over notes in his latest nature landscapes, and he sees information that he could not have. So he is first seeing information about the Siberian taiga, and seeing like the various pine cones that could be found there, and he's like, yeah, I know some stuff about taiga, but this is way too specific. When did I write this? And then he starts going into other sections, and he finds an animal there that doesn't exist, the yeti, right? The creature that we're going to encounter. And then he's like, okay, someone is definitely messing with my records. Because, like, okay, this is information I could have known, maybe, but I would never put a fantastical creature into my nature, encyclopedia. This is very strange. So he's like, I'm gonna redo all this later, because someone's coming, and it's this Anderson, the psychiatrist, and he comes in and he's like, hey, it's really nice, so and so forth. My name is so and so, and I would make it a little bit that when the psychologist talks to him, I would have him talk to him on friendlier terms, more familiar terms, and Edward not really recognizing it, and the viewer either. And the last thing that the psychiatrist would say after their encounter, which would go more or less the same, where he's refused, is that, like, we might see each other again soon. And I would have, and this, written there, and the psychiatrist knew that he would see him next week and the week after that, right? And there's your seed of doubt. So the psychiatrist has been coming here a while, and Edward is having these problems for, not just the whole thing with the Yeti and the thing with the nature outlook, but also he is beginning to forget the current experience that he's experiencing, and this is due to something that we'll get to into part 3. But part 2 goes a little bit the same. There is a letter from the psychiatrist who's like insisting, look, we need to look at your brain, something is going on, I'm gonna come clean, this is not the first time we spoke. And Edward throws away the letter into a pile of dung. He like opens up the pile of dung that he's been using for the surrounding farm, and he throws it in, and he sees that there are more letters very similar like that from the psychiatrist. And now he's like, okay, something's crazy going on. He goes back into his house. He talks with his neighbor, trying to calm his nerves, and then his neighbor tells him about the Yeti. So he's like, okay, this situation is spinning out of control. Now I'm imagining that the neighbor's telling me about the Yeti. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna think real hard as to what's going on here. Do I really have a brother? Am I really this person? Where am I? And then the knock on the door comes. Phil has his encounter with Edward. He explains to him what's been happening, and he tells him, and this is where the strangeness is all coming from, the further strangeness, is that Edward has been living like this for way too long. He has been two different people for way too long, and his mind just can't handle it. So while Phil's mind, because Phil is just a projection, and that's the only thing he has, it's fine. He remembers everything. Edward, his body, in order to make sure that he could still function, that his heart could still beat, his body has decided, okay, I'm going to start turning off some other functions, so this guy's still alive. And what's been starting to turn off is his memory, his ideas, his knowledge. And he has forgotten that Phil is not Phil, that it's just his imagination. And so on, well, that's just his projectual, astral, I don't know, whatever bullshit Simak says it is. And the follower, that would be an actual encounter, and you would have him try and do something against the two brothers that has been stranded along. And the last thing I would have is a psychologist coming on his weekly drive-by and seeing that there's no more house there, and we don't know why. He's gone. There you go, there's my brother. So what do you tell me, Robert?
Well,
Yeah.
I I think you might be being a bit too
Yes.
clever.
Clever.
Well,
Okay.
you see, I think the plot doesn't have to be as organic as you want it to be, because life isn't like that often. It's just one dratted thing after another is life, and sometimes authors can get away with, especially in a short story like this, in just piling it on. And Simak probably wrote this one by instinct. He may not have planned it all that carefully, but I like it. I like it the way it is, except for the blinking follower. Um, but even that, I tolerate it because I'm such a tolerant chap. Uh, except when it comes
Well,
to books with
yeah.
dragons in the title.
Well. We'll get to that at some point. Yeah, I mean, you are very, tolerative, but not to my clever ideas, it seems. I think you're being coy, and I think you know that what I've planned out is a perfect little short story there, and you would enjoy reading it. But I understand,
It might not be that short, actually.
No, I look. I don't want to make this into a bet, but I'm very sure that maybe there's 2 more pages there, but like it would be exactly the same format. I would just cut the follower mostly, right?
Yeah.
The follower would be the big thing that comes after him,
Hmm.
and the mystery at the end, right? I wouldn't want to spend too much time on the follower, and I think that's the big problem with the follower section. Actually, maybe you also could tell us what you thought about that section. But to me, it was just the fact that it's not only is it like out of nowhere, it's then over explained. It's like Simak is apologizing to us that this comes out of nowhere, and he's like, all right, all right, all right, all right, let me tell you why this is cool, right? And then he goes on this tirade of the backstory of this guy who we meet on the last couple of pages, and just feels very forced, I guess.
Hmm.
Actually, do you have any other thoughts?
Um, I think the real problem I have with the story is that some things are completely superfluous in the story. They're not really necessary. So first of all, I will disagree with both of you on 2 points. One is, first of all, the when you say it's aimless in an editorial sense, Nikki, I think there is a name to this, because and then to also address Robert, when you were saying like it's okay to have the pastoral setting mixed in with the science fiction airport and stuff like that. See, here's the thing. It is very clear to me that the real aim of the story is Lambert's denial of certain aspects of himself and coming to grips with that. That there is some very poignant. There's a very poignant section on how when Phil left, he had to take, like Lambert had to take care of his aging father, and that's a very powerful family conflict thread right there. It's like one sibling goes away to fulfill his dreams, and then the other is stuck having to take care of family matters. And I think that's really what the story is about. This relationship he has with his imaginary self, and coming to grips with the fact that he never actually had this brother, and that it was maybe a wish fulfillment of his, that his projection goes off to do all the space gallivanting stuff that he himself always wanted to. So in the light of that, so first, the science fiction elements in the story is completely unnecessary. You could cut all that out and the story would still work. right? And there is an aim, because the aim is just basically this resolution of this inner conflict that Lambert has. And the problem is Simak could have made it work with just the psychologist. The follower was completely unnecessary. Like, the psychologist could come the first time round, the second time round is still the psychologist, or it could have been the follower right from the start. Like, introducing both the psychologist and the follower is just like, it's not, you could cut either one of them out and it would have done nothing to the story. It would still have went on. It's like the film The Foreigner. It's The Foreigner, about half the film has Jackie Chan in it, but the thing is, you watch the film, right? You cut out Jackie Chan's part, and the film could have completely worked without Jackie Chan. He was just an insert. He was not necessary at all. Pierce Brosnan carried the movie. The whole movie was about an ex-Irish IRA fella becoming Prime Minister of Ireland, and the consequences and thereof. Like, Jackie Chan was just like not necessary at all. They had no interaction with each other. And I feel like this is the same case here in this particular story. Like, you didn't need both the psychologist and the follower. You just need one. And you don't really need the science fiction stuff. Like, it could have worked with or without. Like the astral projection stuff adds some spiciness to it, but like, it's just about, it's not, it doesn't add that much impact, in my opinion, because the real meat of the story is that conflict within Lambert himself. And I guess that's my take. To improve the story, you just had to remove the follower. On that, I think we agreed, Nikki.
I mean, just remove the story and write it again. If Simak gave that to me and I'm his editor, I'd be like, okay, do better.
I don't know if I would go that far.
Well, I'm a very bad I'm a very badass editor. I don't even tell him what's wrong with it.
Yeah, well, I would, I don't know if I would to, maybe the reason why the spaceport and the follower is there is just to give it like it's just to get it published in a science fiction magazine.
Well, yeah, I had that thought. You know what? You're completely right. I've had that thought as soon as you said that, and I've been mulling it over whether that would be possible. You're completely right, because this was published in Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. I mean, if it didn't have the sci-fi, it wouldn't be published here.
Yeah,
maybe,
maybe it was another Paycheck Conan,
Or maybe it was an editorial intervention where they said, not enough sci-fi, put a Yeti alien in there. And he was like, put a what?
Could be, could be.
But then again, it's got a bunch of stuff. By the way, the guy you were talking about right at the beginning with the paintings and the the mechs, that's Jakub Rosalski. He's a Polish guy.
Jakub how do I say that?
Rosalski. Yeah, Jakub Rosalski. He has a series called 1920 Plus, and it's all about these like beautiful landscapes with Slavic workers toiling or doing stuff, and then there's a mech or like a bunch of troops in mechanized suits. It looks very eerie and cool. And he basically did it to make people more aware of what culturally and historically happened in Poland at the time. But to me, it's just cool pictures, to be honest.
I mean, like the visuals are just very striking of those. It's just like the contrast is just like, Oh my god, that is so weird but so cool at the same time. Doesn't quite
Yeah.
work as well for brother though.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm mentioning that artist again is because that contrast is, when used best, that contrast can get someone who was watching a normal melodrama on a TV into sci-fi. Because, right, you could, if you're really good at what you do, you write a script, and most of it is just human interaction, right? And then something happens, and it becomes extraterrestrial. It becomes fantastical. Um, and you could really get a viewer who never watches that kind of stuff into it, into the situation, because they started with something familiar and they have been eased in into something weird. And Brother attempts to do that, and I commend it for doing so because it's very hard, right? And it's no wonder that we all three of us, whether on the degree of how this did we dislike it, we all have our gripes with it. Even the White Knight, Robert Gibson, has said "f the follower," you know. So you gotta applaud Simak for trying, but you also have to point out what's wrong with it, because one of the reasons I think that our listeners listen, those of them who desire to publish something or work on something, it will be very beneficial for them to hear what even the greats, such as Simak, could do wrong and could do better. There you go. That's my point.
When you said mech, I had no idea what you meant. This
Uh,
pictures.
A
I thought,
giant robot. A Mac
yeah,
is
I
a
yeah.
guess
giant
you
robot.
might have meant Mac, as in McDonald's hamburger.
Yeah, there's just giant Big Macs in the sky attacking the people. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They're basically giant robots, like around 50 feet high. You know, stand. Just imagine one of those very classical European paintings of a rural landscape. You have that thatched house, and then you have a field, and then you got peasants in their peasant clothes, tilling the ground, and then somewhere in the background, covered by mist, is this 50 feet tall robot.
I'll send you an article with some pictures of it, Robert, if you'd like, so you can have a look. And maybe we could put that in the description so people could have a look themselves as well. It is very well made. All right, my final thoughts on Brother, unless you guys have. Oh, you know what? Actually, there is one thing that I want to say before the final thoughts. The idea of someone astrally projecting themselves as a power within the sci-fi universe is quite frequent. And I'm not sure whether it appeared before or after this story, but I think Simak did enough groundwork there for it to be a very fascinating power in his story, in this universe, in the universe of Brother, because that's really what intrigued me. So he can't really touch anything unless he concentrates really hard, unless he sort of like forces all of his energy, as he said, to do menial tasks. And I just, do you guys think that could be possible if you could somehow control matter, right? I'm controlling matter right now, aren't I? And I'm exerting. For those of you who are just listening, I'm slowly moving my hand up and down the screen. I'm controlling matter. If I could somehow connect to matter 100 miles away from me, and my brain commands it to do up and down, what says that how is that exactly implausible? Not I combine not plausible and impossible into one word there, gentlemen. Yeah. Do you guys think that that's something that we are not that far away from, with all the Wi-Fi stuff and all this? I was gonna say shit.
Well, if we ever got to understand the mind-body problem, then who knows what would happen? But I don't think we ever will myself. not in scientific terms, anyway.
Well, if not in scientific terms, what do you mean in spiritual terms? Like
Yeah,
make your peace with God, or
yeah. Or there might be the other spiritual terms, sort of neutral ones, but nevertheless, it would be not subject to what we understand as scientific laws.
well, if you talk to the hippies, they say they found that out, already in 1960s. So we're a bit far behind then, Robert.
Yeah, hippies. The trouble is they've got no brain, so that's a handicap.
So there's nothing to connect, is what you're saying. Okay. Well, Roll of a Tangent does not hold the same views as the guests upon the panel. All right. All right. Yeah.
Oh, by
Thank
the way,
you all. Huh?
sorry, just one last point. In his novel Way Station, Simak has a different take on this projection business. He has what he calls the shadow people. It's worth reading that. One a
And what?
hero.
How is that? How is the shadow people different from the way it works in Brother?
Because the hero knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He uses alien technology to create illusions to keep him company because he's extremely lonely. And they're the
Oh,
shadow
okay.
people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I presume then it's the same power because Edward just has a psychological problem. That's why he can't remember it. He made a mental block in his mind to forget the fact that Phil is him. I don't think it's a side effect of the power. I think it's a side effect of his malfunctioning brain, to be honest.
Maybe.
But anyway, thank you all for entertaining my, sci-fi in Today and Now section. Yeah, my last thoughts on the tale. I enjoyed it. I could have enjoyed way more of it if it was written close to the way I described my version. You know, but it is what it is. And actually, I think within my version lies the all the reasons why I didn't like it, right? Because I wanted something expansionary and strange. I wanted something that would keep me on the edge of my seat, making me go from moment to moment with Edward as he's seeing his world slowly crumble, his reality slowly crumble. But that's not what transpired. Still, Simak did a good job in writing the prose itself and creating a narrative. Some would say multiple. And I would give him a solid 5 out of 10 for this attempt at fiction. There you go.
I'd
That's
give
my
him
score.
7 out of 10, I think.
7 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Why a 7?
I just like the number. It's quite a nice number.
I'm never asking you again. All right, XJ, what did you?
Probably around a 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you like the number? Or
No, it just felt like a fair score, to be honest.
Fair score,
It's not a terrible story by any means. Just feel like probably doesn't belong in a science fiction story, really, as a science fiction story.
Sure.
And I think, like, personally, I am like Scrooge McDuck when it comes to adding elements into a story. Like, if I give a name to something, they must be used. So, and used properly. So, like, throwing in the psychologist and then throwing in the follower is like very wasteful of names for me. Like, I have a name budget, I have a character budget, and the follower is just completely unnecessary in my opinion. Could have been cut out.
If you're gonna do one scene with a character and he appears only once in it, right? In the book, it's gotta be the best scene for that character. Like that's kind of the approach I have. If you do have some sort of a throwaway situation where you're never gonna use that person again, you gotta make it flavorful that people come up to you on during conventions and say, look, I really want to know about Akrobar or whatever. You know, like that guy really intrigued me, and so on and so forth. Anyway, those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and well, I guess any last words on brother?
No, no.
No. All right. Well, we are trying to improve the podcast in various ways, and if any of our listeners got any suggestions on how we might push our podcast to better heights, please feel free to leave a comment below, and we will take it very seriously indeed. And with that, I bid all our listeners a good day or good night, wherever you are.
Take care.